I did.
And those questions were economic in nature, were they not? Since I make absolutely no apology about my leanings or who I work with.
Are you a commie?
No, I am a union supporter. There is a difference, and I think that unions should have a higher say in the economy than they currently do. That's a suspicious sign already. I just want to know, just to be absolutely certain of who I'm dealing with here, what do you think about taxation?
Oh, straight up, just taxation is theft. Why should my money go to someone who doesn't work, never earned it, and why should the government take away part of my paycheck that I don't consent to?
Well, I know full well who I'm dealing with now, but I'll humor you, because, I'm such a nice and polite toaster, as evidenced by the fact that I've erected the privacy screen around us. But, it's kind of funny that you talk about people getting taxes that never earned them. Well, guess who gets a big portion of our taxes?
Welfare queens and bureaucrats?
Wrong. You're wrong. It's mega corporations who get corporate bailouts that involve our tax money. Billions, billions of dollars come from working class people, including our labor, well, not even including our labor, plus our labor, and our surplus value, and our taxes go to supporting people like McDonald's and Walmart. There's two facts that I want you to consider here. Did you know that McDonald's and Walmart, the two biggest employers in the country currently, before 2030, when everything just goes to shit and becomes controlled completely by corporations, we'll get there. We will get there, I assure you. Most of them are on food stamps. And the crack-smoking ideas that Americans have of welfare, that's because they're not paid a living wage. And everyone deserves a living wage. If we're going to go by precedent from FDR, from Teddy Roosevelt, and from the general consensus of any politician from about 1915 all the way up till 1955 or thereabouts, or the 1960s. But the problem is, even under a neocorporatist worldview, this makes no sense. No sense at all. Why would the biggest employer in the country have to have such razor-thin margins that without corporate bailouts, they would just run out of money and die? Shouldn't they just die under the whole capitalist mindset? And let's go for another problem that you have with taxation, is that it takes a bit out of your paycheck. Well, the problem there is it's a tiny portion of your paycheck as a working class American. The rich only have a whopping tax rate about 3 times higher than yours, despite having millions of times more money than you do. Like, they could live completely comfortably, in fact, they could live opulently, and they'd still have enough money for like 1,000 lifetimes of this opulent lifestyle stashed away, doing fuck all. And yet they can't control their businesses in such a way that they don't need corporate bailouts. But also, part of that profit comes from the thing called surplus value. let's say I work at a box factory, and my job is to glue together boxes. I can make 400 boxes a day. That's a low estimate, considering that's doing boxes by hand, and that's with a hot glue gun, and all that sort of, and I'm doing an 8-hour day, which we'll get to. I'm doing an 8-hour day with a 30-minute lunch break in the middle, and I can do 400 in a day, and I'm getting paid 8 hours. Every box costs $1.25. We'll call it $1.50 because, I add a little bit of value to the box when I build it, because a folded and glued box is useful, and I have put labor into it that makes it inherently more valuable. Let's just say a glued box costs $1.50. Well, suddenly I'm making $600 worth of boxes every single day, so that's, $6,000 every payday, every 2 weeks. So what am I getting out of making $6,000 worth of product in 2 weeks? I'm getting roughly about $1,200 of $1,200. So that means that I'm running at a surplus value of about $4,800. And mind you, this isn't just taken away from my paycheck. This isn't taken away from my paycheck. No. But I'm making $4,800 worth of extra value that I'm not seeing any of. And bear in mind, I live somewhere cheap to live. $15.60 or $15.20 an hour, $1,200 a paycheck is really damn cheap. If you lived in one of the more expensive metropolitan areas way out there, or you lived in like LA, or you lived in any large city, then you'd have to be pulling in a lot more money to be able to afford an apartment, food, rent, food, electricity, bills, this and that, and clothing expenses in case something is repaired. It would cost you about, people recommend that you have an income of about 3 times what the rents cost, so that the landlord is sure that he's not giving an apartment to someone who might not pay their rent on time, etc., etc. In the U.S., usually now that would require you to earn almost $3,500, $3,600, almost $4,000 every rent period. That's more money than the vast majority of people in the U.S. earn. Cities are becoming unlivable because wages have stagnated to the point where people just can't afford to properly live anymore, and corporations are always trying to cut costs and reduce their own operating expenses, so employee payroll stays as low as it can go most of the time. And there was some companies were feeling the pinch, and they had to raise their wages because no one would work for dirt poor wages in the middle of the pandemic. That's perfectly understandable. But the thing is, they were not sufficient. $15 an hour in some cities is not a living wage still. In fact, a lot of states you can't even live in for $15 an hour. And that's what FDR created minimum wage for. Minimum wage was supposed to be a living wage for a full-time job. And besides, it's not just teenagers who get minimum wage. Get that idea out of your mind. Most people who earn minimum wage are 30 years old. And it doesn't even make logical sense. Bear with me, if we're all just high school students making pocket money for minimum wage, when that's not what the point of it is at all, then these teenagers would be at school when you went to get lunch, and there would be no one working there. It's almost always 20, 30-something-year-old people who have no other ability to find work, because there's a limited job market. There's limited jobs available. Not every job you can actually get a hold of. Not everyone has a master's degree in their back pocket. Not everyone can afford to work at some of these places. In this situation, I might physically not be able to understand the prerequisite to get the course that I need to pay lots of money for to get a good job to pay back the money that I used to get the job in the first place, and then on top of that, I have to pay rent and I have to pay expenses. Like, all of these things just pile up on top of each other until the cost of living is unfathomable. It's not that the government takes like $20 out, like a couple of coffees out of your paycheck, that your boss does not pay you enough and has an incentive to not pay you enough, because that means more money for the company, more profits, and therefore the boss can afford more fancy yachts and things. Like, it's not a whole thing where, all the money from hardworking people gets put to welfare. No. And in fact, the funny thing is, Canada tried UBI during the pandemic, and the pilots showed that entrepreneurship actually increased. So people aren't not working because of UBI or welfare. In fact, they're working more because they can afford, because they use that as starting capital to create their own business, because they don't have to worry about things like, food, rent, housing, all of this sort of stuff they need. Their bases are covered so they can invest money into other things. That's what welfare is supposed to do, to provide a base level of subsistence so that people can afford to live. And if my taxes are going toward that, I have no friggin' problem with it. I have a problem with the CEO of Walmart getting my taxes, because that's not what taxes are supposed to be for. Taxes are supposed to be for the public interest, and Scrooge McDuck getting my money is not my interest as a member of the public. Besides, you have a problem with no consent for taking taxes. Well, your boss takes all of your boss steals your surplus value anyways, and you didn't like him, so why are you complaining about politicians doing things without your consent when your boss doesn't rule with your consent? There's no consent to the government in a capitalistic relationship. You don't like your boss. Your boss doesn't really have to care about you. They care about profits in the end. It's a business. He makes money. He pays you a portion of it for your work, and not what you're worth. So, who's the real thief in this situation?
I see. I have a couple friends I'm going to introduce you to.
Get the fuck out of my office. I am not so naive as to let you talk to your Neocorporate friends.